working on Unit 5, Lesson 3 practice problems. So you've watched the notes video. You saw how we can come up with these equations to represent these functions. Now it's time to do the practice problems. So I've got here, I've got number 1 says the value v of your quarters in cents is a function of n, the number of quarters you have. So remember, when we say these function statements, we're always or almost always saying the output first, and then after you say that phrase is a function of, that's your input. So we talked about that with lesson 2, and that's pointing out, how this goes. So when it says for number 1 here, draw an input-output diagram to represent this function, I know my input is n, the number of quarters I have. So I'm going to put that there. Okay, n is the number of quarters I have. My output is the value v. So I'll put a v there. Now, how do I get that value? Okay, well, we all know a quarter is worth 25 cents. So however many quarters I have, that needs to be multiplied by 25 cents. So if n represents that number of quarters, remember we always put the number first, that means I'm doing 0.25 n, or 25 cents times n, the number of quarters. Okay? To write an equation that represents this function, again, we're starting with the output first, so it's going to be v equals, and then that rule, because that rule uses the input, so the input will be in there, right? So it's 0.25 n. For number 3, it says find the output when the input is 10. Okay, well, now that I have this equation, that's pretty easy. I know the input is represented by n, the number of quarters. So basically they're saying here, find the output when the input is 10. They're saying when you have 10 quarters, how much is that worth? So v is equal to 0.25 times 10. And we talked about this in the lesson, multiplying a number by 10. Whoop, just move the decimal over. So the value is 2.5, except that's not how we write money. I'm going to add a 0 onto the end because money goes out to 2 decimal places, right? The value is $2.50 for 10 quarters. Okay. The last question that goes along with this, it says identify the independent and dependent variables. So my independent variable is only one of them, and my dependent variable. Oops, what's going on there? Let's get rid of that. My independent variable in this case, remember I and I, right? Independent goes with input. And up here we said input is n. Well, what did n stand for? It stood for the number of quarters. Number of quarters. That means the dependent variable, that's the output, that's the v, and that stood for the value, the overall value of the coin, of coins, I should say. All right, that's the first 4 questions, so that's almost half of your assignment. This middle section, it has, I guess it's all number 5, but there's 4 problems here, right? So we need to solve for x for each of these, and I'm going to zoom in and do one at a time here. So I'll start here with A. When I draw my wall, it's just a 2-step equation. Don't let the fractions, make this seem more difficult than it is. We still do the same steps to get x by itself. Okay. My first step in this case, this little 2-step equation, is to add 3 to both sides. And that gets me 2/5 x is equal to, now 1/5 plus 3 is 3 1/5. So Not too difficult to come up with that one. But then x is being multiplied by 2/5. My next step would be, the opposite. Divide both sides by 2/5. Another way to say that would be, you could say multiply both sides by 5/2, right? Multiply by the reciprocal. We found out earlier this week what that word reciprocal is for some of us that forgot. But when I'm doing that, I think it's easier. Some of you don't know how to do mixed numbers on the calculator, so I think it's easier to change this to an improper fraction, this 3 1/5. So to do that, remember you just multiply the denominator by the whole number, so 5 times 3, and then add the numerator. So 5 times 3 is 15, add 1, that's 16. So this is really, okay, this is the same thing as 16/5 divided by 2/5. Okay, well remember, when you're dividing by a fraction, you can keep, change, flip. Keep the first fraction the same, 16/5. Change the division to a multiplication, and then flip that bottom fraction, the 2/5. So now it's 5/2. And look what happens when we do that. Okay, those 5s, boom, they cancel each other out. And now it's just 16 divided by 2. And 16 divided by 2 is 8. Okay, of course you could just enter that in on your calculator if you know how. Okay, B, let's scroll on over to B. So B and C both have variables on both sides. Okay, but here I've got 7x minus 2 equals 3x plus 10. There's nothing to simplify. There's no parentheses. There's no like terms. I just draw my wall and get rid of the variables, get rid of the x's on one of the sides. I'm going to get rid of the 3x. I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. When I subtract 3x from both sides, there's 7x minus 3x on the left-hand side there. That's 4x. So I've got 4x minus 2 equals, now these 3x's, they canceled, and I'm left with just 10. All right, so it's a two-step equation from here. Add 2 to both sides. That gives me 4x equals 12, and then divide both sides by 4. And that gets me x equals 3. Okay, so halfway done with the solving equations. Let's look down here at C. So C also has variables on both sides. I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to get rid of the variable on the left this time. Okay, so get rid of the variable on the left. That would be the opposite. The opposite would be to add x to both sides. That gets rid of the minus x on the left, and I'm left with just 5 over there. Now on the right-hand side, remember, when there's no number written in front of the x, right? There's no number written here. There's really a 1. So this is 1/2 x plus 1x. That's 1.5 x. And then plus 2. Okay? And now it's just a two-step equation. Subtract 2 from both sides. 5 minus 2 is 3. So I've got 3 equals 1.5 x. X is being multiplied by 1.5. Divide both sides by 1.5. Always do the opposite. Now 3 divided by 1.5, that equals 2. Okay. Go on to the last solving problem here. We do see parentheses, so right away that should send off a light bulb in your head, like, oh, parentheses, I know I've got to distribute. Draw your wall. Negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x, and then negative 3 times negative 8 is positive 24. And that equals 18. Looks like I've got to, it's just a two-step equation from here. Looks like I've got to subtract 24 from both sides first. That leaves me with negative 6x equals 18 minus 24. That's negative 6. Okay. And then x is being multiplied by negative 6. But you guys can say, what can I multiply negative 6 by to get the answer of negative 6? Yeah, we should know already that it's 1, but let's do it anyways. When I divide both sides by negative 6, a negative divided by negative is positive. And that's it for those. Okay. For this last part of your assignment, it says solve each system of equations. Now, it's been a while since we've done this, but you guys hopefully remember, if we don't have a graph, and we talked about this on Tuesday, but if you don't have a graph, set the equations equal to each other. If both equations have y by themselves, you know where they're going to cross. They'll have the same y value, and if they have the same y value, that means you can set the two equations equal to each other. That's how you solve for x, but that's only half of your answer. Remember, your answer should be an x value, which we'll find here in just a second, but then you have to get the y value. Okay, so your answer should be an ordered pair. Okay, and I know that both of these, I can tell just by looking at them, both of these have one solution. How do I know that? Look at those slopes. The top equation has a slope of -2, the bottom equation has a slope of 3. Different slopes, one solution. Same thing for this problem. The top equation has a slope of 4, the bottom equation has a slope of -8. Different slopes, one solution. Okay, so let's go ahead and set these equations equal to each other. So for A, that means I'm doing -2x plus 4 is equal to 3x plus 9. Okay, now on the right-hand side, I've got the bigger x term. So I'm going to get rid of the smaller one. In this case, I'm going to add 2x to both sides. And that leaves me with 4 equals 3 plus 2 is 5. So I've got 5x plus 9. Bring down that plus 9, right? And now from here, it's just a two-step equation. Subtract 9 from both sides. We're left with -5 equals 5x, because those 9s are gone now, right? And then divide both sides by 5. X is being multiplied by 5, so I'm going to divide by 5. -5 divided by +5 is -1. So x equals -1. Okay, but that's only half of your answer. You got to get the y. So what do? You put it in for one of the x's. Doesn't matter which one. You'll get the same answer. Okay, I'm going to use the top equation. So if the top equation says y equals -2x plus 4, I'm not going to write the x. Now we know what x is. X is -1. So I'm going to put in a little -1 there. It's not -2 times x anymore. It's -2 times -1. And then plus 4. Well, what's -2 times -1? A negative times a negative is a positive. And then 2 plus 4 is 6. That's your answer. Okay? -1, comma 6. That's your answer. You solving for x, that's only half of it. You got to get the y value too. All right, last but not least, we have B here. Y equals 4x plus 2, and then y equals -8x plus 8. Same thing. We know our answer is going to be an ordered pair. We're going to find x right now. We'll set the two equations equal to each other, but then we have to go back and find y. Okay, so for B, I've got 4x plus 2. My equation to solve is 4x plus 2 equals -8x plus 8. Okay, draw your wall. You got x's on both sides. You got to get rid of one. I'll get rid of the one on the right this time. It doesn't matter which one you get rid of. As long as you do the opposite, you'll get the same answer as everybody else. Okay. If I add 8x, since that's a -8x, boom, boom, those are gone. Now on the left-hand side, 4 plus 8 is 12, so that's 12x plus 2 equals, and I'm just left with that little +8 at the end there. And then start solving. So it's a two-step equation from here. Subtract 2 from both sides. That leaves us with 12x equals 6. And then divide both sides by 12. Now 6 divided by 12 is 1/2. So there's my x value. That's only half of my answer. I need to find out what the y value is. I'm going to use the top equation again. But instead of y equals 4x plus 2, I'm going to write out y equals 4 times 1/2 plus 2. Right? We're putting the value for x in that equation to see what we get for y. Well, 4 times 1/2, or in other words, half of 4, is 2. So now it's just 2 plus 2, and that gets us the y value. That gets us the y value, which is 4. Okay, so that's your answer. Your answer for A is negative 1/6. Your answer for B is 1/2 4. If we were to graph those, we would see that's where those intersect. All right, if you guys have any questions with this, just make sure you ask your teacher.